I don't know if I've ever made it obvious, but I love me some Kamen Rider. Hot-blooded men transforming into masked heroes using the powers of evil to fight for the sake of justice and peace, putting their own lives on the line to protect their loved ones and the entire world, hiding behind a mask of their own tears. Or, depending on the show, some random schmuck who gets his hands on a belt and goes around calling himself a Kamen Rider because somebody told him to, maybe collecting Pokemon along the way or to fulfill his own fantasies. Completely ignoring what made Hongo become known as Kamen Rider and his legacy that he continues fighting for even to this day. My own hang-ups on what it means to be a Kamen Rider and complete lack of it in modern shows like Geats and Revice, there is a bit of a goldmine Bandai is sitting on. The last true Kamen Rider game that wasn't mobile or their own arcade card game was Kamen Rider Memory of Heroes in 2020. Of course there is Right Commons, although as of actually making this video, pretty sure not anymore. But it's Otome trash, and who cares about that, smiley face? These fucking dudes don't even wear helmets. Get the fuck out of here. 6 years since the last major console game is kinda crazy for a yearly franchise, and one that is 100% a goldmine if they play their cards right. So once again, I said fuck it and threw caution to the wind, because what do I do best besides make fanfiction? And the fanfiction this time around is Kamen Rider games in different genres. So Kamen Rider has a cast of about 42 main Kamen Riders, 15 Showa, 20 Heisei, and 7 Reiwa Riders so far. And that's not even counting the spin-offs, reboots, and pretty much every auxiliary and secondary rider that isn't counted among the 41 primary riders. Riders like Nigo and Riderman being outliers in their numbering. Combined with this are 55 years worth of concepts, enemies, factions, trinkets, and team-ups that could lead into a very, very easy Vampire Survivor-style game. A sprite or 3D top-down game where you dodge oncoming enemies as a character while choosing random weapons and shields while leveling up, to either defend yourself or do more damage. These items can then be upgraded further, and using 2 specific different items can merge together and create a different weapon altogether. Choosing a rider you like and fighting onslaughts of enemies from every villain faction under the sun. Items inspired by the various Kamen Riders in the shows. As an example, you could choose the Popping Gummy Gochiso, which drops giant gummies on the battlefield and does damage to whatever falls underneath them. Another one would be a Dai Dai Maru that slices enemies around you. Fully upgrading both would then allow you to merge them together into Juicy Gummy, which drops more gummies onto the battlefield that explode into a mass of gummy juice. In the same vein, instead of popping gummy, you could choose the Trideron Wheel that protects you from hits with a wheel surrounding you, bouncing enemies off. Merging the two together would become something like Fruit Driver, where you're surrounded by a giant orange while orange wheels race across the ground doing damage to enemies. A lot of these mergers can reference crossovers or even riders that have similar theming, like a combo based on Double and Build or Geats and Blade. Now, a pretty box standard thing in modern Kamen Rider is forms, and I think as a good reward for playing a character through each stage would be when you finish a progress bar, you unlock a separate version based around the rider's final form. This does get a little iffy with most Showa riders, as most of them don't have form changes or final forms. So instead for them, I think maybe like a glowing version or a light up version, or hell, new game specific forms would be fun. You could give Ichigo his big bulky suit, but I don't think people really like that one, and I'm pretty sure that suit is currently rotting in a toy warehouse somewhere. Character-wise, it'd be pretty simple per character. Some riders would have their form changes as their main gimmick, like Ghost has you manually switch between Ore, Musashi, Billy the Kid, and Edison, whereas a rider like Blade didn't have real form changes except for his upgrade and final form, so his playstyle would involve picking up undead cards from enemy drops that can then be used into different Blade Rouser combos like Lightning Blast and Lightning Slash. Final form variants would have their own gimmicks, like Mugen Ghost can temporarily go invincible, Infinity Wizard temporarily blocks all attacks and returns the damage to the enemy, Geats 9 has his tail sprout out from the ground, Bill Genius drops giant fucking bottles. I don't know, maybe there's something better for that one. I'd give every rider a dedicated rider kick button, different from whatever rider kicks they might do in their normal Kitten animations. You have to use it to kill boss enemies that'll otherwise just hang at 1 HP, just for that, extra bit of Kamen Rider flair and sauce, As for the stages, they'd be based on iconic Kamen Rider locales, general ones like that quarry that Toei loves using, Tokyo, city rooftops, that empty sewer, that one forest, and some more show-specific ones, like Above the Sky Tower, Amonogawa High School, Hell Niflheim Forest, Daybreak Town, Shocker's headquarters. As a fun gimmick for those, with how rapidly they like to switch backdrops sometimes, a fun gimmick for these could be that the longer you go in an unlimited stage run, the stage would constantly switch between different backdrops, or maybe every time you kill a boss in an unlimited stage run, it just swaps you to a new one. You know what makes a lot of fucking money? Hoyoverse. And I mean a lot of money. What you think of gacha games as a concept is your own prerogative, but what that doesn't change is that they make bank. And games like Genshin Impact and Withering Waves prove the hell out of this. So why not just make some Kamen Rider gacha slop? A gacha model game that updates every few weeks with new content. Making a giant adventure game like that outsourced to the Chinese seems like a no-brain idea, and the Chinese fucking love their Kamen Rider. Taking place in a world that's under fire from an enemy faction, you play as a game original Kamen Rider and go around meeting NPCs and gathering allies as you fight the enemies. Combat based on swords, guns, gloves plus boots, and a belt trinket for riders that don't use weaponry much. In true gacha fashion, you'd be rolling for the rider. Each major NPC in the game will be a main rider, and you naturally roll for these as 5-star riders. Secondaries and auxiliary riders would be 4 stars. Some would be given out in events or rolled on for standard banners, typical gacha bullshit. Rider-specific weapons like the Blade Rouser or Magnum Shooter 40X would be on their own banner as 5 stars, while more generic weaponry would be picked up over the course of the game and banner pulling. The game would also introduce riders original to the game, based on Legend Riders, as each new region would be inspired by a specific Kamen Rider story. For instance, like one of the first regions is based on Tokyo, so one of the original riders there are inspired by Kabuto and maybe even the Showa riders. Stat upgrade items will be based around the various show trinkets, based on sets, so stuff like the Gashots, Sectors. These will be gotten in dungeons or instances like Genshin. Randomized stats to make you annoyed and special set bonuses. But there'd be ways to get the stats you want with other items. A little bit of RNG protection because quality of life really does matter in these games. And besides, Hoyo does it in all of their games except Genshin. Kamen Rider back in 2019 for the 20th Heisei Rider anniversary had a crossover with Monster Hunter Explorer, a Japanese exclusive mobile game, although as it turns out, it was out in Canada for approximately 3 months. I didn't know that. I just looked that up. You could get armor and weapons based on Den-O, X8, and Geo. While I don't know much about this game, for I am not Japanese or located in Japan, I do know that I love Monster Hunter as a franchise. And rewatching Hibiki kinda made me realize that they could very easily just reskin God Eater into a Hibiki-inspired game. Like, really, it could be any Kamen Rider, but the Makamo are mostly just big fuck-off CGI monsters, so why not reskin God Eater? It's not like they're doing anything with the franchise right now. Bandai, I'm begging you for God Eater 4, please. The game would let you customize your own Oni, with the classes being based on the 3 Oni types: drums, tubes, and string Oni. Weapons would depend on the monster tree you're using. In a best case scenario, different weapon types have different styles of gameplay, like harps being more ranged, whereas guitars are treated as slash weapons, or tubas are blunt damage, some stupid like that. And like a good Hunter clone, it's a multiplayer game. And with how popular Monster Hunter is in Japan, I'm actually genuinely surprised an idea like this hasn't been tried yet, at least as far as I am aware. And honestly, that's kinda it. I think there's a lot of fun to be had with a Monster Hunter clone using Kamen Rider Hibiki as inspiration. If they get the original monster designers on it, I imagine we'd get to see some insanely cool new Makamo or redesigned ones from 20 years ago that aren't tight into being either 2000 CGI or physical suits that people have to do stunts in. You could pretend to be well trained. At least, I would pretend. This final idea is one I've had cooking in my head for the last 10 years. Right around the time I got into Kamen Rider when Ghost started airing weekly, and where does the time go? Death is no stranger to Kamen Rider. There's a handful of main riders that died but got resurrected, usually tied to their final form. None more so than your boy Tenkuchi Takeru, who died a total of 5 fucking times over the course of his tenure as Kamen Rider, not even counting the 6th permadeath in the novel or at some point in the future, I'm not sure. He dies in episode 1, dies 99 days later but is brought back with an upgrade from his papa, dies a 3rd time but comes back with his final form thanks to the memories of his friends, dies a 4th time in the movie, and then just to add insult to injury, after he survived, he dies in the crossover movie with X8 because, for some reason, the writers really liked killing this kid. And as the year progressed, it kinda hit me. That kind of would make for a killer gimmick in a Souls-like. Rider Souls would, as the name suggests, take heavy inspiration from Dark Souls. Character creator, class selection, stats, lots of death, and exploration through a Metroidvania-styled world. You'd be given a rider armor that would aid in combat, and as you progress and keep dying, you'll eventually be given an upgrade form, a super form, and then a final form, with a hidden bar based around progression to death threshold, meaning that if you died like 200 times before beating the first boss, you'd be handed your upgrade form, whereas if you died 10 times before beating the third boss, then you get your upgrade form. But taking inspiration from challenge and speedruns, there'll be a second way to play the game, entirely without using your rider mode, instead opting to go armorless and beating the shit out of the bosses entirely by skill. Obviously, there is a huge discussion on whether or not Souls games should have easy modes, and while I don't think they should, with it taken away from the experience, I can't deny that the idea of a split system where depending on your skill level you either receive more help in the form of stronger upgrade forms, or showing that true Showa spirit by just using your experimented on Kaizo Ningen body and grit, is a really interesting way to do a Souls game. This would-be game doesn't even need to be based on any other Rider shows. Instead, it could be entirely original, with bosses based on typical tokusatsu generals, a plot revolving around stopping an evil organization that experimented on you and making sure it never happens to anybody else. And these are just a few ideas that I can come up with. Obviously, there's way more genres Kamen Rider could fit neatly into. Go full circle and make a game like Mega Man ZX or Star Force, or a Muso game where you're bursting through enemies, a Yakuza-styled combat narrative game where you go around fighting Shocker while helping random people on the streets of Tokyo. And hilariously, with how long I've taken to write the script, starting in 2025 and only ending just now, Bandai has just announced Project Henshin for the 55th anniversary of the franchise, which, thanks to the trailer, I can only assume is some form of gacha with a guy in a suit transforming into Kuga via his phone. So, you know, great minds? And by great minds, I mean money talks. But who knows, man, it might just turn out to be something else. All I know is Kamen Rider is pretty cool, and I want to play more Kamen Rider games.